Welcome into episode 266 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. The Bruins with an impressive win over the Colorado Avalanche last night at the Garden, a team that, many predict to be among the final contestants in the Western Conference. Bridget, Scott, opening shifts.
That was just an extremely entertaining hockey game. That's, I think what we all love to watch as fans, right from puck drop, when you see the starting lineups where the Avalanche go with Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, Jonathan Drouin, Cale Makar, Devon Taves as their starting five. And Jim Montgomery's like, all right, here's what I've got. David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand, Charlie Coyle, Charlie McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm. And that stayed really the main matchup almost all game. There was a little bit of a stretch in the second period where Montgomery flipped Pastrnak and DeBrusk, and DeBrusk got out there against that McKinnon line, but that you had star on star pretty much all night, and ultimately the Bruins win that matchup. David Pastrnak has a hat trick. McKinnon did score. That actually came when he got on during a line change away from the Bruins' top guys. But entertaining hockey, star power all over the place. Jim Montgomery shied away from calling it a statement win after the game. He downplayed it a little bit, but I'll call it a statement win. I think that was a big one for the Bruins to show, we can go up against one of the most high-powered offenses in the league, Avalanche, number 2 offense in the NHL, and we can play that game. We can go star on star, and we can win.
My opening shift has to do with Jake DeBrusk, who we had a chance to talk to after the game on Thursday. And also, Coach talked a little bit about him as well after the game. He had a goal and an assist. One of his better games. You could just watch him on the ice, even though, like Scott mentioned, lines have been changed a little bit to where they were even on the road trip. So he's playing in a little bit of a different situation, not with Marchand in Thursday's game, but able to put that goal in, which I thought was going to get called back. Actually, I thought that was the one where Zaka was like a millimeter onside, right? So that was a close one. But anyway, he gets the goal, and it was a nice play either way, whether it would have counted or not. But it did, luckily for the Bruins. And the assist on Pasternak's second goal. And when we talked to Montgomery after the game, he said it seems like every game is his best game in the second half of the season. And since December 30th, which, little less than a month ago, he's had 6 of his 10 goals. So he really has turned it on, if you want to call that the second half, like after Christmas, second half. Yeah, he's really picked it up.
Yeah, he's been so much better, and it's not just because of the scoring. And I know there were a lot of analytics probably telling me that he's been playing well all year outside of the scoring, but there was just some significant hard back checks yesterday in particular, and maybe he was doing that earlier in the year, but it just wasn't, for some reason, it wasn't jumping off the page to me. Last night it was. So I don't know. I just think he's been playing really well.
When we talked to him, he said that's the worst you're going to see from me, meaning that stretch when people were kind of getting on him, and he kind of acknowledged it. But I don't know. That's the thing. People don't really understand about him. He at least was trying to be reflective and accountable of not producing in that time frame. And he's not the kind of diva that people say he is. He's really not. He goes after in post game, he usually is pretty reflective, doesn't give you a non-answer. And he I don't know. I hope people have come around on him at this point, because I don't see a reason for them to be as hard as I understood it at the time when he wanted to trade, but we're past that. And I feel like people have changed their opinion a little bit at this point.
I definitely want to circle back to DeBrusk because I have more thoughts on him too. But I would say even that, what you're talking about, Bridget, has changed, because I do think earlier in his career at times, look, he went almost 3/4 of a season after the trade request without even talking to media. He just straight up avoided us. And while I don't think that was the biggest deal in the world, I did think it was a sign of a little bit of immaturity. And I do think like even earlier this season, you're right. Like he was accountable. He answered questions about it. He was pretty transparent, and I think that's another area where he's just grown and matured.
Yeah, and it's you guys obviously being in the locker room, you guys know you talk to him, but for most fans out there, they only see what the Bruins put out on their website or on Twitter as far as like player interactions post game, and they just were kind of shying away from posting DeBrusk. So while you guys had access to him, the common fan didn't really have access to him during his struggles this year, and that kind of also may have been why like your people pile up because they're seeing him not perform, but they're not hearing. You guys are hearing from him, but most people aren't able to unless you're just like reading, every newspaper in town after every game. But so for me, Parker Wotherspoon has been, and I just want to say, I want so bad for his name to be Weatherspoon because it's just a little bit nicer to say.
You and Jim Montgomery both.
Yeah.
Parker Witherspoon just is so much easier to say than Wotherspoon, the elongated O. But Parker Wotherspoon has caught in the eye of Bruins fans, and for no other reason than he's just playing really solid, surprising hockey. Like going into the season, nobody. I don't want to say nobody, but most people didn't know who he was. And to be fair to those people, myself included, he's played 17 games for the Bruins this year, and he has 29 career NHL games. So heading into the season, he didn't have many games at all under his belt. He's a +3. He's just a steady, low risk, blue collar left shot defenseman on the third pair. And, you kind of contrast him with how people are just upset with. I mean, again, I didn't think last night was a great night for Grizzlick. He just kind of seems like he's just not where he used to be mentally, physically. I don't know. It's just he seems he's struggling, obviously. But Wotherspoon, he's like that steady third pair guy that every team kind of wants, and it's what the Bruins envisioned Forbort being. But I just think people like him better than Forbort, at least right now. Like I think he should get a continued look. I think a lot of people feel the same way.
Yeah, he's definitely playing well, and we talked a little bit about how Brandon Carlo's getting close to returning. Derek Forbort's practicing again, still on LTIR. We're not sure exactly when he'll be activated, but like the Bruins do have decisions to make on defense coming up, and right now it would be really difficult to send Weatherspoon down, B to even take him out of the lineup, and even just have him as a seventh defenseman. He is clearly playing like one of their, I don't know what, 4 best defensemen right now. So he's moved up and down the lineup a little bit. He's got flipped left to right side. Seems to complement pretty much anyone he's been with. So I think Grizzly had actually been playing pretty well recently. I do think Thursday was a little bit of a down game for him, but maybe he's not quite back to like peak Grizzly from years past. But I do think I've seen improvement from, say pre-Christmas when he was really pretty consistently struggling. So yeah, it's going to be tough because I don't think there's a trade imminent. Maybe they'll surprise us, but there's going to be a lot of bodies back there pretty quickly. Mason Lohrei is the one who he can go down to Providence with no waivers or anything. Like that's a quote unquote easy move. But I thought Lohrei had a really strong game Thursday too. Like I think you see his confidence growing and him making some good breakouts, skating with the puck in transition, getting involved in the offensive zone. And it's like, I don't know that anyone really deserves to come out of the lineup or be sent down right now, but someone's going to have to.
Yeah, it's not like they're just not going to put Brendan Carlo back in. Derek Forbort's still a little bit further off, but then we kind of talked about that last episode. But Brian, you want to hear something else funny about Weatherspoon? He said his last name's hard to say. Well, some people in Boston would say his first name's hard to say because it's like Parker, right? So one of the reporters who has a very thick Boston accent asked Jake DeBrusk what he thought of Parker. And he goes, what? And then he's like, Parker. And he's like, I don't know what you're saying. And he's like, Parker Wotherspoon. He's like, I should know the accent by now. Like, I should know the Boston accent.
That
It's coming
is
across.
that is a tough name to say for those with a severe Boston accent because you're going Parker Wotherspoon.
Yeah, it's not easy. And I heard it in that full Boston accent last night, and Jake DeBrusk was so confused for a second. I don't know if they aired it or they have it on the website, but it was the last question, and it's pretty funny to listen to.
I was gonna say I wasn't in this scrum. I was elsewhere. Was this Connor Ryan or someone?
No, it wasn't Connor Ryan. The Billerica accent.
Sidebar.
Connor's not Billerica. Connor's Selfie. Me and Ty Billerica.
Sidebar. Can we get some clarity? If not right now, maybe later on. Just like the Boston accent in general, it just skips towns. It's like you have like Malden has it, like Dorchester has it, Billerica has it, Watertown doesn't. Well, no, Watertown does, but like it's like random every other town is like Boston accent, no accent. It's like, what can you explain that to me? I don't get it.
I think there's like a wealth thing. Like I think like upper middle class and higher tends to not have it. This is just my theory. I don't really have any empirical evidence other than just, like,
where I live in Southern Mass, and we have like a combo of like a Boston and a Rhode Island accent, which is even more confusing. You guys should listen to my dad talk.
Well, what's funny is yes, that accent is a horse of a different color. But what blows my mind, and I'm gonna get some people upset here, but like Lowell and Billerica are literally 10 to 15 miles north of the New Hampshire border, but you would think that they were underneath the TD Garden. That one makes no sense to me, but. I'll get some people pissed off with that one, but I know because I grew up in Nashville.
Lives in Billerica and now lives in Lowell.
Right, but I grew up in Nashville.
But it's like everyone moved out here from the city like 50 years ago and then just never lost the accent. So
right.
I'll get this back on the rails to Weatherspoon after one final comment about Boston / the Boston Rhode Island accent. My dad, he'll go, beer and bear are the opposite words. So he'll go, Bridget, there's a beer in the backyard. And I'm like, why are you freaking out about a beer in the backyard? And I walk out and there's a black bear. And I'm like, okay. And then he'll be like, Bridget, can you get me a bear? And I'm like, okay, he means beer. Anyway, that's a fun one. But anyway, I'll get us back on the rails here to Parker Wotherspoon, who has now played almost as many games with Boston as he has in Providence this season. He has 19 games with the Providence Bruins and 17 games with the Boston Bruins. So he's only 2 games away from being even. And I feel like Brian's frozen.
Yeah. People watching on YouTube are getting a great shot of just frozen smiling Brian.
At least he froze in the best possible face. He's like smiling right at the camera. Usually it's like one eye open and the other one like rolled back in your head. But yeah, so he's been with the team for a while now. And he seems to have made a case for himself to stick around. We're having more technical difficulties today. But is there anything else you wanted to say, Scott, about Parker Wotherspoon while we try to get Brian back?
No, not really. Obviously just highlight, the assist on DeBrusk's goal, which was just a real simple shot, clearly looking for a deflection, and got it. And again, that's, I think Montgomery's talked about this, how he said, even going back to the summer when he first met Weatherspoon via phone call after he signed, he said, what stood out was just how much Weatherspoon understood his own game. Like he told Montgomery, here's what I do well. Here's areas that aren't a strong suit for me. And was just very in tune with what his game is, what his style of play is, what he can and can't do. And he goes out on the ice and just does that. He knows what he can do. He does it. He knows what he can't do. So he doesn't try to do it.
And so someone asked him, who do you model your game after? And he said Duncan Keith was one of the guys he looked up to growing up. Obviously, Duncan Keith's probably someone a lot of defensemen in this generation looked up to. because at that time the Blackhawks were so good, and he was, one of the best defensemen in the league at the time. So it kind of makes sense. I mean, he's more of a stay back defenseman. He said, because him and DeBrusk played against each other. What league was it? It was before, obviously, well before they were in the NHL. They played against each other. And he said, Weatherspoon said, every defenseman in that league thinks that they're an offensive defenseman, but I had to change the way I played because in the NHL, it's not that way. Not everybody gets to be an offensive defenseman.
Yeah, and that's like one of the toughest things for young players to kind of learn and accept. It's the same thing with forwards, right? Like Johnny Beecher was a first-round pick who thought, I'm going to score at every level. And at some point has to come to the realization that while, yes, you're always working to score more, like you're ultimately going to cut your career as a pro doing something else. Like your defense, face-offs, penalty killing, physicality, that's going to have to be your strength. And young players who learn that and are willing to put the effort into that side of the game, like you're going to set yourself up better for a long career than the kid who just thinks he's always going to score, he's always going to be an offensive defenseman and refuses to adapt or accept any sort of different role.
So I saw that you were interacting with people on Twitter recently about Weatherspoon, and you were pretty much saying like, yeah, he's playing well. Not sure he's a long-term fixture in Boston. Do you still feel that way? And if so, why do you feel that way necessarily?
No, I would say that's definitely changing because he just keeps playing well game after game. So right now, my opinion would be it would be really hard to send him down. It'd be really hard to keep him out of the lineup.
Well, this ties into the conversation we had. We got a mailbag question about this. Which free agents are the Bruins not as likely, like which ones are least likely to come back? And Scott said maybe even all three defensemen that are free agents, which is Shattenkirk, Grzelcyk, and Forbort. He could see the Bruins letting them go. And then if that's the case, then Weatherspoon has a role here next season, and you may see him get a new contract. You may see him fill in that Forbort gap for a cheaper price. So you get a similar thing. Forbort leaves, or if any one or two or three of the free agent defensemen leave, you at least kind of have this idea that he could be one of the guys to fill in, and Lohrei as well.
Yeah, and like I also don't necessarily think Weatherspoon needs to be an everyday player. Like he's not like a 22-year-old kid who's still developing and therefore he needs to play every night somewhere. Like I think he can be the kind of defenseman who's maybe in and out. If he sits 3 games in a row, it's not really going to affect him. Like I think he can get back in and play his game because, it is a little bit of a simplified game. Like that's, he probably doesn't have to be in every single night to keep that up. So he's sort of, emerging as like that perfect kind of swing defenseman, like 6th, 7th on the depth chart, in, out, can kind of fill in anywhere.
Yeah, when I was talking long term, I was more so talking beyond this year too, right? Like if he keeps this up, I mean, third pair defensemen, like they can surprise you. I mean, the Bruins had a 4 or 5 year stretch of championship caliber hockey, and Adam McQuaid was a staple on their third pair. And I don't think many people envisioned who Adam McQuaid was before he all of a sudden was a fan favorite. It just sometimes organically you find the right players.
He made the 100.
He is a 100. Maybe for their 200th season, maybe Parker Wotherspoon is a top 100 player, 200 player.
Hey, maybe I'll see him today because sometimes he goes to the PC men's games and scouts because they have 2 guys that are draft eligible. I don't know. I see him around different rinks because he's part of like recruiting and developing talent. So sometimes he's just at rinks and I see him other places.
Okay, yeah. So definitely a great development with Weatherspoon, Parker Wotherspoon.
Yeah, and one last thing I would just note on him, like defensemen do tend you do see more late bloomers on defense than up front. And as an example, I would think of Kevin Miller as someone who, didn't even make his NHL debut until he was 26 years old and ends up establishing himself as a third pairing regular. Like, I think he had 2 or 3 full seasons in Providence before he came up. He was an older college grad out of Vermont. Like it can happen. So, there's sort of a model that Weatherspoon might follow.
Parker is 26 and he's an August birthday. Great guy. Very close to my birthday, but so he is 26 right now.
So look, Scott, to your opening shift about the star power last night, David Pastrnak kind of put it on display right away.
Yeah, that just a great first shift from the Bruins starting 5. Got right into the offensive zone, pressure on, couple early shots on goal, and then just as it looks like the Avs, finally have control, about 40 seconds in, Makar gets the puck on his stick. You think he's going to clear it out. Everyone's going to go off for a change. Charlie Coyle makes a great poke check, just reaches out, steals it from Makar, goes right to Pastrnak, who turns and roofs it.
That was an insane shot. I said to Scott, like, how the hell did he do that? Watching it live in full speed, it was like, what just happened? That was insane.
Yeah, and it was in and out so fast. The ref actually ruled no goal first, and then quickly changed it and was like, "Oh no, that did go in." But yeah, that shift really kind of set the tone for the night, where the Bruins got the upper hand early. The Avs certainly made a push back in the second period. They had a really good second period, 16 shots on goal, and then the Bruins just collectively as a team shut everything down in the third. Only gave up 4 shots on goal, which, for a team that early in the season had some trouble kind of closing out games with a 1-goal lead, really encouraging sign. They've been getting better at that. And now to slam the door shut like that on one of the best offenses in the league, really encouraging. And yeah, just in general, to see the Bruins stars kind of embrace that matchup. Like Pastrnak said after the game, that's fun when you're out there in those matchups. He did say, McKinnon's kind of a different beast, and you wouldn't be upset if you don't get that matchup. But nonetheless, like, those guys clearly embrace it. Coyle talked about taking pride in that matchup. And I thought this was a big game for Coyle too, because he's the guy sort of in that group that, wouldn't have been in a kind of star on star matchup last year. And now he's the one centering Marchand and Pastrnak, and he more than held his own out there with and against all those guys last night. He has, like I said, the steal from Makar on the first goal. He has a steal from McKinnon on Pasternak's empty netter. So very strong game for him, noticeable at both ends.
Yeah, it's this kind of time where I like to remind the people who argued with me back in 2019 that it was stupid to trade for Charlie Coyle, that they were very wrong. Ryan Donato, we can't get rid of Ryan Donato. This is crazy. I was like, you guys are crazy. Charlie Coyle is way better. And as of right now, he's your number 1 center. So I'm going to take a victory lap every time he does this. My friends that said, oh, we don't want him. He's been great. And his contract, I know people were complaining about his contract a few years back. They said, he's a third line center. He shouldn't be making this much money. Well, look where he is now. And he hasn't had the ability to move higher up in the lineup because Bergeron and Krejci were there most of the time he was here. I know there has been other opportunities that they threw him up there and it didn't stick at first, but now that he's had an extended period of time being a top 6 center, he looks like he has the confidence and skill of a top 6 center.
So, I mean, Coyle's been great. And certainly a top 6 center. I think if anybody was to emerge as like the number 1 center this year, we probably would have said maybe Zach over Coyle, just because we thought he had a higher offensive ceiling, but Coyle has been outperforming him offensively too. I still think, like, the numbers may say otherwise, and that he could be a low end true number 1 center, but this year, but he's still not a true number 1 center. And I still think it's like, you still have to question, like, can this Bruins team accomplish what they want to if Charlie Coyle is like their number 1 center, even though he's playing like a number one center, but I think you guys understand what I'm saying. Like to match up against McKinnon in a 7-game series would be a different animal. Though I will say, like
he did well in the one game sample.
He did, and like, and that's exactly why it's like, this is not to discredit him. It's just like kind of a real conversation. But like the Bruins in general, like you watched the Avalanche last night, and you watch them against every other team in the league or most teams in the league, and it's like you watch them against the Maple Leafs, right? And Makar and McKinnon are doing whatever they want out there. For years now, the Bruins have had this structure, regardless of what players filter in and out of the lineup, and often on the roster. Like star players in the NHL, just like they never have their way with the Bruins. Like the Bruins always make it hard on them, and I don't want to say they make them look pedestrian out there, but like they'll go most of an entire hockey game, and you can just tell that like it's not as easy against the Bruins as it is against other teams for these star players to do their thing. And yeah, here and there they break through because they're elite, but I think that's a good sign for the Bruins as a team in general.
Yeah, there's only been a few games I can think of that all of a sudden it's like ugly early against the Bruins. It's like 5-0. Like there's only a few games in the last several seasons I can think of. Like there was one Carolina game that I think they lost like 6-1, and it was kind of ugly. But at least I think Clifton fought D'Angelo, so that made up for some of it, for some of the crappy offense. But Scott, you were definitely looking something up just now.
Yeah, so I was trying to look up where Coyle ranks among centers in scoring this season, and filtering through NHL.com because they label some guys as centers who aren't actually centers. But it looks like Charlie Coyle currently ranks 32nd among centers in points. So that's not even like on a per game basis or filtering 5-on-5 or anything, just total points. So yeah, I guess to what Brian said, like 32nd would be low end number one center.
That would be still your first. That's still one. There's 32 teams. That's still your number one guy. Yeah, because no one else is higher than him either on the Bruins. So
yeah, and I guess obviously the obvious question or follow up would be like, to be a true cup contender, do you need better than that from your number one center? I guess we're gonna see, because spoiler, I don't think the Bruins are going to add a true number one center before this trade deadline, but maybe they'll surprise us.
Did you guys want to talk about DeBrusk a little bit and then go to our ups and downs for the week? Because I know we all still had a little bit left to say about DeBrusk. Which, by the way, in the scrum, he came out with stitches in his jaw, like in his chin. And so he had a few stitches. He said he accidentally lifted someone's stick into his face, and he said, I should have yard sailed and pretended I got high stick by the guy who's kidding, obviously. And by the way, they don't call that anymore. Like if you're responsible for the stick hitting you in the face, don't they usually say that's not a high stick?
Right.
Like if you lifted
like by definition, it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So, sometimes they fall for it and call it anyways because they're not
yes,
good at their
exactly.
job.
That's true. We had a whole thing about this as well. But yeah, he came out. He said the stitches hurt a lot. And so he had like 2 or 3 stitches in his jaw. So he got that in the first period as well. So he played with that for the rest of the game. But that's just an aside because I didn't know if anyone else saw that he had that happen to him. And I obviously, anytime I see someone get hit in the face, I'm like, that's, and he still played. So, which hockey players do. So Scott, you said you still had more to say about DeBrusk and the maturity that you've seen from him.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that really stood out to me post game was when he was talking about, getting going, putting up points now versus early in the season. And he said that he knew he was going to get out of it. And he said in the past, that might not have been the case. In the past, he would slump and he'd wonder, how am I going to get going? How am I going to turn this around? And he said even earlier this season, even though the points weren't there, he knew that he could do it. And he knew that he could get out of it and get on track. And, sometimes that's obviously easier to say when you come out on the other side. You can look back and say, oh, I knew I was going to be fine. But I think even talking to him earlier this season, like you could kind of hear that even at the time where it was, he was certainly frustrated. He admitted to being frustrated, but he also said like he thought he was playing pretty well. He thought he was doing the right things. He felt like it was coming for him. I do remember there was one time where he said he was a little concerned because he felt like he hadn't been getting as many chances recently. And I think any scorer will tell you like that's when you do actually get concerned, is when you're not even getting chances. But there were stretches in there where he was getting chances and not burying them. We talked about it though, and I think the biggest change is just how much more he's going to scoring areas, how much more he's getting to the net front, how aggressive he's being, driving to the net, getting pucks to the net, which was lacking a little bit at times early this year. So, but that all kind of ties together, right? Like it's all confidence. It's, you tend to go to the net more when you're confident that you can get there and that you're going to get rewarded when you do get there. Whereas when you're lacking confidence, maybe you defer more, and instead of driving to the net yourself, you pull up and you look around at your options and hope someone else drives to the net. Like that, it can all kind of come together, but it just, he looks like a player that's just so much more confident right now. And finally getting points. It really all ties together with him.
Yeah, and you just said it all right there. And confidence is key, which I knew all along, and that's why it's like, to get confidence, it's a catch-22, because to get confidence, you got to find the score sheet. But I feel like, and I felt at the time, it's like you just go to those dirty areas and you will find the score sheet, and then the confidence will come. It was, for me, it was like, where's the reluctance to do those things consistently? Because if you do it consistently, a puck will go off your shin padded in, and then there you go. But in any event, eventually he found it, and now he's going. And again, this is why, like, when he's not playing, when he's not producing, and he's not playing with all that I think can, even though the analytics will say that he is playing well, I think there's still more he can bring, because he's a really good player when he wants to be. Like you'll never hear me get on Jacob Lauko, who isn't scoring, which, by the way, he got his first goal last night, because I don't expect it out of him. I expect it out of DeBrusk, and to be consistent, I'm applauding him now because he's playing the way that he's capable of, and that's why when he's not playing, I'll also call it out. I just muted myself again because Jake's probably on my computer. But
yeah, so I was doing some math yesterday as well, and Lauko's played in 73% of the Bruins games this season. He's played quite a few, more so than in the past, obviously. And Lohrei has actually played 61% of the Bruins games. So he's played more games in Boston than he has in Providence this year. So if, in case people were kind of losing track of where these guys are at, in terms of how much playing time they're getting or how many games they've been involved in, those guys are both higher percentage, I'm sure, than people might have thought. But you can see the games mounting. Lauko, it's funny because in the past, Lauko was kind of an up and down guy, but this year he hasn't been. Like he was having transactions and going back to Providence and coming back to Boston, and this year he's stuck around, and he played on the third line on Thursday night, and yeah, he scored pretty early too. And very excited about that. But then he didn't get that much playing time after that. His minutes were still pretty low. What?
Because you're talking about Lauko and his goal, my mind just jumped, and I don't think he's necessarily going to be in our who's up, who's down. But Morgan Geekie is playing some really strong hockey. Like his puck possession and his effort level is like, should be really applauded, because I don't know if you guys picked up on that either last night, but it was very evident last night. Like nobody takes the puck off his stick in the offensive zone, and he knows how to use his size. And I just want to give him a shout out, because also his foot speed seems to have been getting better too, and maybe that's just like knowing the systems more or getting more confident in a new team. But my knock on him earlier in the year was like, yeah, he's a big body, he protects the puck well, he's kind of smart, but he doesn't seem like he's the quickest player. But he's a powerful skater, and I wasn't giving him that credit earlier on, and I want to give it to him now.
Yeah, Geeky had one especially awesome shift last night where he had like multiple plays of just holding onto the puck, protecting it under pressure, and then making like good passes back to the point, leading to shots. And I think I tweeted at the time, but like I immediately thought, I was like, that looks like someone who's learning from Charlie Coyle. Like it was Coyle-esque puck protection.
And they're
Before,
similar, like they're both big and they both are really hard to take the puck away from.
yeah. Before we run through more who's up, who's down, I did want to follow up on DeBrusk and ask you guys a question. Does it at all change how you feel about like the possibility of trading him? Because when we were talking about like, we've gotten mailbag questions about, do you trade DeBrusk? Should they? Whatever. And my take for a while was like, well, you can't trade him while he's slumping. You can't trade him when his value's at its lowest. Well, now he has some value again. Do you look at it and think, hey, he's playing well, he's helping the Bruins win, I'm not even thinking about trading him? Or is there a part of you that thinks like maybe cash in while his value's on the upswing?
No, I still keep the same opinion that you're better off with him this season. Now that he's actually producing like a top 6 winger, we already said you're probably missing another top 6 forward. Why would you trade one out? Like to me, it doesn't make sense that he'd be moved at this deadline for either reason. His value may have gone up, sure, but if your end goal is to extend him and re-sign him, then which I think it is, then keep him. He makes your team better in the playoffs if he's playing like this. So why would you want to get rid of someone if they're playing like this? Then they could do this in the playoffs. I know, Brian, you look like you maybe have a different opinion, but
no, I don't.
I haven't changed. I think he's with the team through the end of the season. I don't think he's getting traded.
No, my honest answer is I have no interest in trading him if he's playing like this. And I mean, unless there was a trade where, Scott, as you've put it in the past, it's a clear upgrade. But my question is, who's trading a clear upgrade for? Like who would knowingly want to lose a trade? Like, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's like, I don't necessarily know that DeBrusk could get you what you. Yeah, no. My answer is no. I'm not interested in trading him this year because you just said it. You do need the top 6 talent, and there's always the possibility. What's annoying about DeBrusk is when he's slumping, I'm always kind of on the fence about it because it's like, well, he can produce at that level. You think he's going to at some point, right? But to answer your question, no, I'm good with him for now.
Scott, did you change your mind about it, or?
No, I'm still of the same opinion, which is if he's playing like this, I want to keep him. But if he were part of a trade for a clear upgrade, whoever that might be, and obviously it would have to be a package. It's not going to be a 1-for-1 deal. But I'm just thinking like, say the Bruins end up being players for like an Elias Lindholm. Money has to get moved out somewhere as part of that trade. So it's like, would Calgary be interested in DeBrusk as part of that package? Now, that said, I don't know that I even like that trade because Elias Lindholm's not having a great season. And maybe a change of scenery helps and gets him going. But I don't actually know that that's even like a clear upgrade right now with the way that the two players are playing.
The only way to like make things interesting, and again, I'm just talking. I'm not even like doing a numbers crunch here. Like, but if there's a package involving like Grzelcyk and DeBrusk, like, or something like that, I'm sure there could be some enticing proposals you could send my way, if money made sense and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it's short of that, it's like, it's tough to just speculate,
So for ups, like we can run down our list. So there are many more ups this week because they've won 3 straight and they've been playing. Besides the second period, that second period was not that great. Mostly though, they looked good on Thursday, and so we've kind of already gone through some. Geeky, you mentioned Brian, DeBrusk, Weatherspoon. Just do you guys quickly want to list off any of the other ups that are like obvious. I mean, obviously Pasternak with a hat trick. And then we can get to, there weren't many downs, but we do have at least one.
Well, somebody who this is gonna be quick for me, but man, I'm just 180ing recently. But somebody else that I think is playing good hockey right now is Lindholm. I think he's playing good hockey.
Yeah.
He's looking like the Lindholm that like the Bruins got originally, and the way he played for the first, year and a half. Like that, he wasn't playing that way earlier this year. And I don't care what anybody tells me.
Forgot I had this graphic. This is
line changes.
Yeah, this is supposed to be for when we changed our opinion about something. And Brian's.
What is this the inaugural line change usage?
Maybe. I don't know. I made this a while ago.
I was gonna say I didn't even know what this was.
I mean, look, the way I'm talking today, if I were to start a hockey team, I would start with Jake DeBrusk and Hampus Lindholm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was gonna highlight Lindholm too, but also just that pairing of him and Charlie McAvoy together. I think both were excellent Thursday against Colorado in about as tough of a matchup as you can possibly get in an NHL game. They both played over 10 minutes against McKinnon at 5-on-5, and they were both a +2. And Lindholm also had a nice assist on Lauka's goal. He pinches down the wall and all in one motion collects the puck and hits Geekie on the doorstep, and really could have been a chance that Geekie buried. He kind of briefly fumbled it and then slid it back across the crease for Lauko. But yeah, I thought he had a really strong game, as did McAvoy there. McAvoy is a +5 during this 3-game winning streak. Lindholm a +4. So yeah, just another very obvious one. Jeremy Swayman got his 4th straight start, 3rd straight win. Had to make some real high quality saves, especially in that second period as Colorado tried to come back. So he just keeps rolling. Linus Ullmark was back as the backup on Thursday. I would guess Ullmark starts Saturday, but Swayman has certainly made the most of this extended stretch as the starter.
And to circle back to 2 guys from our last who's up, who's down last week, what do you guys think of Boquist, who we had as an up previously, and JVR, who we said was a little bit quiet? Do you think he's moved in the right direction?
Scott, do you have an opinion on JVR?
Yeah, I think he's played well recently, and he was a down as much as anything because he was a little bit in and out of the lineup. He had been dealing with kind of that nagging injury, whatever it was. And then they got put on the 4th line at one point because I think they were kind of managing his minutes. But now he's up into the top 6. He was playing with Zach and DeBrusk on the second line, and yeah, I think he's playing better. He's got 2 assists recently. He's made some really great plays around the net front, especially on the power play. He's back in the top power play unit, which I think I said, I don't know, 2 episodes ago that, I wanted to see him back in that top unit at some point, and you have, and I think it's paid off. Brian, I think you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to mime the rest of the episode. He also had a goal against the Devils that was called back due to, I think, a prior offsides, but it didn't affect like his goal, which was, the along the goal line pulling it, and I think that was a nice play, right?
Right.
Didn't count, but not because of him. So for me, Boquist, I like Boquist. He's kind of been like a mystery flavored airhead, honestly, since like the Bruins signed him, because they signed him and they put him in Providence, and it's like you just don't really see him. But since he's been called up this latest stint being called up, it's one of those times where you sit there and you say, oh yeah, like this guy does have NHL experience and NHL speed and skill. He just hasn't really put it all together consistently in the scoring department. But if we're talking a 4th line role right now for this Bruins team where he's providing speed and creativity, and he's checking with his legs, and he's responsible on both sides of the puck, then I think he should also get a continued look, because I think he's outperforming Lauko. Despite his first goal last night, I think he's better than Steen probably, and Beach is a player that I think we all expect a little bit more from going forward. But yeah, I like Boquist.
Yeah, I was gonna say Boquist being an up comes at the expense of maybe one of the only Bruins who's a down this week, and that is Johnny Beecher, who's been a healthy scratch for the last 2 games. He's now been a healthy scratch 4 times in the month of January. Um, and when I don't feel like he's been playing like super poorly when he's been in there, like just making terrible mistakes all over the place or anything. But clearly they do want more from him. That when he's been the center on the fourth line, that line has not produced much offensively. And that's not all his fault. We just talked about Lauko just got his first goal. Oscar Steen has not had many points at all this year. So I think, is Steen still stuck on 1 point? Or has he gotten a second one at some point? But anyways, regardless, not a lot of scoring there. Yeah,
Not a lot of anything there, Scott. Not a lot of anything there, really.
Yeah. I mean, look, Beecher's face-off ability keeps him in the conversation because there have been times that they've struggled on face-offs when he's been out of the lineup. But ultimately, like, you do need more than that. And, I think they're finding a little bit more with some other guys right now, including Boquist, whose speed has been noticeable. You see some offensive creativity, at least an ability to make things happen there. And it's gonna be really interesting to see what happens with Beecher going forward, because when it comes time to activate Forbert, it's not just potentially defensemen going down, but because of their cap situation, there might be a forward who has to go down too. And usually healthy scratches can be kind of telling as to who might go down. And let's remember that Matt Patra's been out recently too. Like, he is just now getting back from that shoulder injury last week. He was on the ice for warmups Thursday, but ultimately didn't play. So once he gets back in the lineup, that's even one fewer spot for Beecher to get in.
Yeah, and when you're a fourth liner or a third pair defenseman, you have to fight for your spot in the lineup every night. You have to make a case for yourself. It's not that you're not safe really at any point if you're on the fourth line, and especially you're not safe if you're Beecher and you have one of the only two-way contracts on the team, that you're the easy option, so to speak, to send back down without somebody having to clear waivers. So that's the difficult part of playing in that part of the lineup. If you're not making a case for yourself night in and night out, and other people are fighting for that spot. Boquist has wanted this opportunity the entire year, and he's finally gotten it. He is a center. I was looking at his faceoff numbers. He was exactly 50% on the game, 4 wins, 4 losses. I don't think he's, a liability at the dot. I know you said Beecher is good, but
I will say Boquist has been in the past. His face-off numbers in the NHL in his career are bad.
Can I ask you guys a question? And especially with this Bruins team, I'm really not concerned with labeling lines. But what would you think about a trio? And I know there could be some positional redundancy here, but if we're talking speed, and potential chemistry, like, I wouldn't mind seeing a trio combination of Boquist, Heinen, and Patra. If you want to call it a fourth line for a few games, go for it. And I know there's some positional redundancy, but like, I don't know, like the way Frederick and Geeky are playing together, like on a third line role with whomever, JV, like, it doesn't really matter. I'd be interested in seeing that potentially at some point too. Just because, for no other reason, to see what you have.
Definitely an interesting combination. You probably throw Boquist to the wing for that, and Patra center, you think? Yeah.
Probably, yeah. But just to see it,
it certainly leaves something to be desired size-wise in terms of a bottom six line. But, if you're kind of already reimagining what your fourth line looks like, which they clearly are because they've been trying a bunch of different combinations recently, then I guess anything's on the table, including, not that he deserves it, but we did see a game where Trent Frederick was the fourth line center, and the fourth line got more ice time than usual that game. And I think that's something that Jim Montgomery wants to find too, is like, he wants to find a fourth line that he can actually use. I was looking back at last year, Tomas Nosek averaged over 12 minutes a game. He was over 10 minutes pretty much every single night. And if you look at Johnny Beecher, he has not been over 10 minutes since December 27th. Like, kind of, not that they're the exact same player or whatever, but you do sort of pencil them into that same role as fourth line center. But Montgomery trusted Nosek to use in 3, 4, 5 more minutes a game, which is important. Like, especially as you're talking about the second half of the season and maybe trying to manage some minutes at some point or get a little bit more balance. Last night's a game where all the Bruins top guys played over 20 minutes, and you're fine with that in a game like that. But you don't want to do that game in, game out down the stretch. So finding a fourth line you can actually play is important.
Yeah, and again, like that's this Bruins team is just like, any line that David Pastrnak is on is a first line, but it's almost like this team has call it like 3 second line. It's like they have a first line, a second line, and 2 third lines. Like it's not necessarily like an elite third line, but they have 2. They're not a traditional team, and I just don't think the days of like having a big strong fourth line that's going to intimidate with their physicality. It's not really there. If they're going to try to have a fourth line that checks with their speed and their skill, then go all in on that and see how it goes for a little bit. And I'm shocking myself saying this, but I have to go based off of what their current roster construction is. So,
yeah, and the fact that we couldn't come up with a really great option for them to bring in on the fourth line that would be physical and make sense. So
exactly. Yep. All right, guys. I think that probably wraps up. If you have anything else to say.
I just have one. Eras night is Saturday. There's another Eras night. Scott, is that what you're going to say?
No, I was going to briefly cover the news that Milan Lucic's pre-trial hearing took place Friday morning, and a trial date was scheduled for February 16th. As far as the Bruins, what that means is that you're probably not going to hear anything about Milan Lucic for another month. And then one last little news and note. Bruins practice is happening while we're recording Friday morning. So Steve Conrad of the Boston Herald said, Marchand not skating, not a surprise. I'm going to assume that is maintenance. But Zacha centering Patra and DeBrusk. So I think this is the first time in a practice we've seen Patra on the wings. So something to keep an eye on. That might just be because Marchand's out and someone needs to move over to the wing, but something to monitor.
Definitely. All right. Well, that wraps it up for this episode. Thank you all for listening. Enjoy your weekend, and we will talk to you on Monday. Hey, guys. Thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.